Nina Covington stood frozen in the doorway of the grand Hoffman estate, watching in complete horror as the man she had just agreed to marry stuck his entire finger up his nose, and then ate it. Right there, in front of his grandmother, in front of the butler, in front of God and everybody. Mmm, Charles Hoffman hummed, a goofy smile spreading across his absurdly handsome face. Salty? Nina's eye twitched. This man was 6'4", built like he bench-pressed trucks for breakfast. Skin the color of burnished bronze, jawline sharp enough to cut glass, a face that belonged on magazine covers. And he was acting like a 5-year-old who had never been taught better. His grandmother, Evelyn Hoffman, cleared her throat delicately. "Charles, dear, we have guests." Charles looked up with wide, innocent eyes. "Guests? Are they here for my birthday? I want chocolate cake." "It's not your birthday, sweetheart." "Oh." His face fell, then immediately brightened again. "Can I still have cake?" Nina turned to her mother, Denise, with a look that could curdle milk. "You cannot be serious," Nina hissed through clenched teeth. Denise's smile didn't waver. It never did when she was getting exactly what she wanted. "A deal is a deal, Nina. 3 months. That's all you have to survive. 3 months married to that." Nina looked back at Charles, who was now attempting to catch a fly with his bare hands, giggling every time he missed. How did she get here? How did her life spiral so completely out of control that she was standing in a billionaire's mansion, about to marry a man who apparently had the mental capacity of a kindergartner? Let me take you back, because this story, it's messier than you could ever imagine. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this plays out. Now let's begin. The Langston Mansion sat on the north shore of Lake Michigan like a monument to marble, money, and make-believe. Nina Covington had lived in that house for 20 years. She had never once felt like she belonged, because she didn't. Her story started in a tiny apartment on the south side, with a man who smelled like engine grease and coffee and loved her like she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Elijah Covington, her father. When Nina was 2, Elijah lost his job. The factory he worked at shut down, the checks stopped coming. And suddenly there were bills he couldn't pay and promises he couldn't keep. But Denise, her mother, did not do broke. One night, while Elijah slept, she packed a suitcase, scooped up baby Nina, and left. Straight into the arms of Franklin Langston, a man with old money, new power, and zero interest in raising another man's child. Within a year, Denise had a new last name, a new life, and a new baby. Madeline Langston, the golden child, the favorite, the one who actually mattered. And Nina? Nina became a shadow. Nina, steam Madeline's dress. Nina, fix Madeline's hair. Nina, clean Madeline's shoes, and don't scratch the leather this time. 20 years of being treated like unpaid help in her own home. 20 years of watching her mother coo over Madeline while barely remembering Nina's birthday. 20 years of learning, over and over, that she was disposable. But Nina had one thing that nobody could touch: art. When she held a pencil, the world made sense. When she held a brush, she could breathe. Sketchbooks under her bed were packed with portraits of strangers on the train, the way light hit the lake at dusk, faces she imagined when she couldn't sleep. Sometimes, when she was feeling particularly reckless, she drew a man she had never really known. Elijah. Strong hands, soft eyes, a smile that might have been hers. Her mother always refused to talk about him. "He didn't want you," Denise would say lightly, filing her nails. "Why are you so obsessed with a man who walked away?" So Nina learned not to ask, but she never stopped wondering. Across the city, in a glass and steel penthouse that scraped the sky, Charles Hoffman was trying and failing to convince the one person he could never say no to. "I don't want to get married, Grandma." Evelyn Hoffman sat across from him, a porcelain teacup in her hand, her silver hair pinned back in a style that had been elegant for the last 50 years and would probably still be elegant for 50 more. She was small, delicate, but her presence filled the room. She had built Hoffman Global from a neighborhood logistics company into an international powerhouse. She had buried a husband and a son, and she had raised her grandson with iron in her spine and love in her hands. "Charles, the Langstons have been expecting this marriage for years," Evelyn said calmly. "It's not just about you. It's about the company, the board, the future of Hoffman Global." "I'm the future of Hoffman Global," Charles shot back. "I've tripled revenue in 6 years. I know every division. I sleep 4 hours a night. I don't have time to play house with a stranger because Franklin Langston wants a fancy in-law." He crossed the room to the windows. Chicago glittered beneath him, a mosaic of light and opportunity. At 28, Charles Hoffman was the king of this city. A billionaire by birth, a CEO by choice. 6'4", built like he'd been carved out of a locker room fantasy, with a body he kept sharp through brutal morning workouts, and a face that had sold more magazine covers than he could count. He had also dated just about every type of woman you could imagine, and most of them had seen dollar signs where his eyes should have been. "Every woman I've dated the last 10 years cared more about the black card in my wallet than the brain in my head," Charles said, not turning around. "Or worse, they cared about the last name. They wanted to be Mrs. Hoffman more than they wanted to know me." "Madeline Langston is not every woman," Evelyn replied. "She comes from a good family. This isn't about your money, it's about alliance." Charles snorted. "Rich girls are the worst. They may not want the card, but they want the power. Same greed, better packaging." Evelyn's gaze softened. "This isn't only about business, sweetheart. You work yourself to death. You come home to an empty penthouse. I won't be here forever. I want to know there will be someone to look after you when I'm gone. Someone you can come home to." Charles's jaw clenched. He hated when she talked that way, like she was already halfway out the door. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't say that." "The doctors say I have a good heart for my age," she said mildly. "But my age is still my age." He turned then, his expression open and raw in a way he allowed with no one else. "I can handle this company," he said. "I can handle this city, but I can't handle losing you." "I know," she murmured. "That's why I'm trying to make sure you're not alone when that day comes." She reached over, took his hand in both of hers. "Marry the Langston girl. Give it a chance. If you truly can't stand her after, say, a year, we'll talk. But I want to see you walk down that aisle while I still can." It was emotional leverage of the highest order. And it worked. Because Charles Hoffman was ruthless with everyone. Except her. He exhaled slowly. "You know I could cancel this engagement with one phone call. Buy out their company. Replace their contracts." "Yes," Evelyn said, "but you won't. Because you love me, and because you know it would break my heart." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "Fine, I'll marry her," he said. "But I'm not promising anything beyond that." Evelyn smiled, relief and joy softening her features. "That's all I ask." 10 days before the wedding, Charles left the Hoffman Tower later than usual. The board meeting had dragged into the night. Rain lashed against the tall windows. Lightning flashed somewhere over the lake. "Bring the car around," Charles told his assistant, Jerome, as they stepped into the private elevator. "On it, sir," Jerome replied, texting security. In the underground garage, security cameras watched everything. A black Hoffman-branded sedan sat waiting in Charles's reserved space. What the cameras didn't catch, what no one noticed in real time, was the shadow of a man in a maintenance jacket, crouched near the front tire 10 minutes earlier. Quick hands, a small tool, a clean slice through a critical line. By the time the elevator doors slid open, the man was gone. Charles slid behind the wheel. He liked to drive himself when he could. It was one of the few places he felt truly alone. The rain pounded the windshield as he pulled onto Lower Wacker, headlights cutting through sheets of water. The wipers worked overtime. He was tired, bone-deep tired. His mind churned with numbers, contracts, his grandmother's thin face when she talked about, "when I'm gone." He almost didn't notice the first red flag. The brake pedal felt soft, not quite right. He frowned and tested it lightly. The car slowed. Sort of. "Probably just the wet," he muttered to himself, merging onto Lakeshore Drive. Traffic was light at this hour. Streetlights blurred into streaks of gold through the rain. He took a curve and saw twin headlights appear suddenly in his side mirror. A dark SUV, no plates on the front, sliding into the lane behind him. Too close. Charles's instincts, honed in boardrooms and hostile takeovers, flared. He eased onto the brake. Nothing. The pedal went straight to the floor. His stomach dropped. He pumped it again, harder, useless. What the? The SUV behind him accelerated, closing the gap like a predator scenting blood. This was no random malfunction. They were pushing him, literally. The SUV nudged his rear bumper. The sedan skidded. The wet pavement turned to ice beneath his tires. Steel kissed steel again, harder this time. The guardrail loomed. For one split second, Charles saw it all with terrifying clarity. The slick road, the dead brake pedal, the anonymous SUV with illegally dark tint, the way it angled itself just right to send his car spinning. Then the world turned sideways. Metal screamed, glass exploded, the city lights flipped and tumbled. And everything went black. He woke up to beeping, bright lights, the smell of antiseptic, a dull, throbbing pain in his side. "Mr. Hoffman, can you hear me?" A doctor's face swam into view. A woman in blue scrubs shined a light briefly into his eyes. Charles tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain flared in his ribs. His left arm was held tight in a cast. "Easy," the doctor said. "You've been through a lot." He blinked, forcing his brain to catch up. "Where's my grandmother?" His voice came out hoarse. "She's on her way. We called her as soon as you came out of surgery." "Brake failure?" another voice said near the doorway. Officer's tone. "Car went through the guardrail. You're lucky, Mr. Hoffman. If you'd gone 30 feet farther, you'd have hit the concrete pillar." Brake failure. That was the official story. But Charles remembered the SUV. The way it had ridden his bumper. The plateless front. The angle of impact. Random accidents didn't feel that organized. A nurse adjusted his IV. "Try to rest, sir. You're safe now." Safe. Charles closed his eyes. No, he thought. I'm not safe. I'm a target. His grandmother arrived an hour later. Evelyn Hoffman looked older than he had ever seen her. Smaller, like the worry had carved pieces out of her. "Charles." She hurried to his bedside, clasping his uninjured hand. "Oh, baby, you scared me half to death." "I'm okay," he lied. Physically, he would heal. But his world had just shifted on its axis. The wedding, the company, the fact that someone, somewhere, wanted him dead badly enough to sabotage his car. He couldn't show fear, couldn't show suspicion. Not yet. "How bad?" he asked the doctor when Evelyn stepped out to take a call. "You were lucky," the doctor said. "Broken arm, 2 cracked ribs, concussion, some bruising. But your scans look good. No visible brain damage. We'll monitor you for a few days, but you should make a full recovery." A full recovery. Publicly, that was the last thing he needed. Because if people knew he was fine, whoever had tried to kill him would know they'd failed. And they'd try again. Later that night, when Evelyn finally dozed off in the visitor's chair, Charles's head of security, Dre Holloway, slipped into the room. Dre was ex-military, mid-30s, with eyes that missed nothing. "You look like hell," Dre said quietly. "Feel worse." Charles studied him. "Tell me." Dre glanced at Evelyn to make sure she was asleep, then spoke low. Mechanics pulled the car apart. Brake line was sliced clean, not torn, cut. No way that was wear and tear. "Police?" "We didn't share that part yet," Dre said. "Figured you'd want to decide how loud to make this." Charles stared at the ceiling. So it was real. Someone inside his orbit, or with access to his orbit, wanted him gone. "Who knew my schedule tonight?" he asked. "Small circle," Dre replied. "Me, Jerome, your driver, who was off because you said you'd drive yourself. Your grandma, her assistant, and your head of PR because of the press call you skipped. That's it on our side, plus whoever has ears in the building. Too many people, not enough. And on top of all that, a wedding in 10 days to a woman he'd never met, from a family he didn't fully trust, tied to a merger that would hand the Langstons a major foothold inside Hoffman Global. He could call it off, buy them out, cut them off. But he saw his grandmother's face when she talked about "before I'm gone." Heard the tremor in her voice when she almost lost him tonight. He couldn't do that to her. Not now. Not after this scare. He exhaled slowly. Dre, he said. I need you to hear me out before you tell me I'm crazy. Dre's mouth twitched. That bad, huh? I'm going to start acting off, Charles said. Slow, confused, like the accident messed with my head. Dre stared at him. Come again? I'll pass the medical tests, Charles continued. You just heard her. No brain damage. But that only means they didn't see anything on a scan. It doesn't say how I'm functioning. If I start behaving like the elevator doesn't go all the way to the top floor, they'll call it trauma, or subtle damage, or whatever fancy term they like. And why would you want that? Dre asked slowly. 2 reasons. Charles ticked them off with his good hand. 1. Whoever cut those brakes, they'll think they hit me where it hurts. A weak CEO, a confused heir. I'm less of a threat if I look harmless. Dre nodded reluctantly. People get sloppy when they think you're down. Exactly. And 2, a crooked smile tugged at Charles's mouth. You know that arranged marriage Grandma's so excited about? The Langston girl, Dre said. Madeline. If she shows up and I'm sitting in a corner eating crayons, how long you think she'll stick around? Charles asked. A week? A month? Dre huffed. So you're hoping she bails on you? If she walks, Charles said, Grandma won't blame me. She'll feel bad for me. The Langstons lose face. The marriage ends without me having to break her heart. So this whole mentally 6 years old thing is your way of dodging the wedding and flushing out a killer at the same time, Dre summed up. Pretty much. Dre stared at him for a long beat. Then he shook his head. I've seen some wild moves from you, boss, he said, but this is a new level. Can you keep it quiet? Charles asked. No one knows I'm faking. Not the doctors, not my grandmother, not the Langstons. If anyone asks, you act like I've lost a few steps. You see moments where I slip up, you cover. Dre sighed. This is gonna be a nightmare. But you'll do it. You sign my checks, Dre said dryly. And someone did try to end you. I'll play along. But if this blows up, I reserve the right to say, I told you so. Charles gave a low, humorless laugh. Deal. He settled back against the pillows as Dre slipped out. A few minutes later, Evelyn stirred and woke. Charles, how are you feeling? He turned to her and allowed his expression to go loose, unfocused. Grandma, he said, voice a little too loud. Why are we in the doctor house? Did I fall off my bike again? Evelyn went white, and Charles Hoffman began the performance that would change everything. Now hold up. This man really decided to fake being cognitively impaired to dodge a wedding and smoke out a potential killer at the same time? If you think this plan is reckless and about to backfire in the worst way, drop a comment. Charles, what are you doing? But if you think it's a genius idea and you're already falling for his smarts, comment, he's so clever, and hit that like button because the drama is only just warming up. 3 days later, the Langstons got the call. Madeline received the news in her favorite massage chair, silk robe on, cucumber water in hand. She had been glowing all week. Can you believe it? She said earlier that day. Admiring herself in the mirror while Nina zipped up her 5th designer dress for the pre-engagement dinner. I'm about to be Mrs. Charles Hoffman. Do you know how many girls would die to be me right now? Nina, pinning the hem, had kept her face neutral. At least 3 of your bridesmaids, judging by how they look at his pictures. Madeline had giggled. Well, they can look all they want. I'm the one who's going to be on his arm. Private jets, penthouse in Manhattan, summer in Capri. She sighed dramatically. I'm finally getting the life I deserve. An hour later, Franklin Langston called her into his study. Madeline stomped in, annoyed at being interrupted. This better be good, Daddy. I was picking out honeymoon villas. Franklin looked strained. Charles Hoffman was in a car accident. Madeline's hand flew to her mouth. Is he alive? Franklin said quickly. But the doctors say there may be lasting effects. Cognitive issues. He's not fully himself. Madeline stared at him. You mean he's, like, slow now? The Hoffmans are saying it's trauma, Franklin replied. They're hoping he'll recover. The wedding is still on for next week. Madeline let out a short, ugly laugh. Not with me, it isn't. Madeline, I'm not marrying some broken man, she exploded. I agreed to marry a billionaire CEO, not somebody who needs flashcards to tie his shoes. Keep your voice down, Franklin hissed. This house has ears. Madeline paced, furious. You expect me to spend my life babysitting, wiping drool, explaining simple things over and over? No, absolutely not. Find another solution. There is no other solution. Franklin snapped. We're too deep. I've already leveraged half the company on this merger. If the Hoffmans back out, then that's your problem, Madeline shot back. Not mine. In the doorway, half hidden by the frame, Nina watched silently. She had already known Madeline cared more about black cards than black coffee. But even for her sister, this was cold. Franklin raked a hand through his thinning hair. If we walk away now, the Hoffmans will bury us. Then send them someone else, Madeline said, tossing her hair. We have 2 daughters, remember? That's when both of them turned to look toward the door, right at Nina. Nina, come in here, Denise called sweetly. Nina stepped into the study, spine straight, heart racing. She had seen that look in her mother's eyes before. It meant trouble, for somebody else. We have an opportunity, Franklin began. You have a crisis, Nina corrected quietly. You're just hoping it's my problem now. Denise's smile didn't waver. Charles still needs a bride. The Hoffmans are expecting a Langston daughter at that altar next week. They don't know Madeline from a hole in the wall. All they know is Franklin has a daughter of marriageable age. I'm not a Langston, Nina said. I'm a Covington. You remind me every time there's a family photo. We'll use the Langston name for the paperwork, Franklin said briskly. It keeps things clean. Legally, you're still you. Madeline rolled her eyes. Oh, please. You're acting like she's some innocent lamb. She's been living here rent-free for 20 years. Time to earn your keep, sis. Nina felt her nails dig into her palms. This is insane, she said. You want me to marry a man who just suffered a brain injury so your company doesn't tank? You'd be saving all of us, Denise said smoothly. Isn't that what family does? Nina laughed, a short, harsh sound. Family? Interesting choice of word. She turned toward the door. If you walk out of here, Franklin said quietly, don't come back. Denise added, almost lazily, I know where your father is. Nina stopped like she'd been slapped. Slowly, she turned back. What? Elijah Covington. Denise studied her nails. You've always wanted answers, haven't you? Where he went after I left. Why he never came for you. You told me he didn't want me, Nina whispered. I told you what I needed to at the time. Denise shrugged. But I know exactly where he ended up. Last address, contacts, everything we've got. If you do this, if you stay married to Charles for 3 months, we'll give it all to you. 3 months. 90 days married to a stranger who, according to the rumors, now played with blocks and forgot his own age. And after 3 months? Nina asked. The merger will be finalized, Franklin said. You can file for divorce. Walk away with whatever settlement you negotiate. Everyone wins. Everyone but me, Nina said. Silence stretched. Fine, she said at last. I want something else. Madeline's head snapped up. Excuse me? You will give me my dad's info at least 1 month into the marriage. Then I want half of Madeline's inheritance at the end of that 3 months, Nina said, voice steady. In cash, transferred to my account before the wedding. What? Madeline shrieked. Absolutely not. Mother! Denise's eyes narrowed. Why? Because I'm done begging you to fund my future, Nina said. I want to go to art school, a good one. I want to buy what I need without being told we don't spend money on hobbies. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm charging you for 20 years of unpaid labor. Madeline sputtered. She can't just. Franklin was already calculating. The Hoffman merger meant security, clout, survival. Half of Madeline's inheritance was a painful cut, but not a fatal one. We'll do it, he said finally. 3 months of marriage. Then the money. And the information on Elijah Covington will be sent earlier than that. Madeline stared at him like he'd stabbed her. She's stealing my future. She's buying ours, Franklin shot back. Nina felt strangely calm, numb. Draw up the papers, she said. I'll sign. Her voice shook only once, on the words she'd chased her whole life. Remember, she added quietly. 1 month in, and then, you tell me where my father is, or I'm out. The Hoffman estate looked like something out of a movie. Long driveway, manicured hedges, a front door big enough to park a car through. As Nina followed the butler inside, she felt her pulse in her throat. She wore a simple white dress that set off her light gray eyes. Her hair fell in its usual side-swept bangs, covering part of her forehead. A habit born from years of her mother joking, "So much forehead on such a small face. At least half your thoughts must fall out." Standing in this marble palace, those old barbs felt even sharper. They were led into a grand sitting room. Evelyn Hoffman rose to greet them, moving with the grace of someone who had once commanded boardrooms and still commanded respect. "You must be Nina," Evelyn said, taking her hands. "I'm so glad you came, dear. You're even lovelier than I imagined." "Thank you, Mrs. Hoffman," Nina said softly. "Call me Grandma Evelyn," she said with a small smile. "We're going to be family after all." Before Nina could respond, a loud clatter sounded behind them. A tall, broad figure in sweatpants and a designer t-shirt came skidding into the room in socks. "Grandma, I made a tower." Charles Hoffman. There was no other word for it. The man was objectively, unfairly, almost offensively beautiful. Tall and broad-shouldered, with skin like polished bronze and a face that looked like it had been sculpted by someone with an unhealthy obsession with perfection. His body moved with an athleticism that was impossible to hide, even under the ill-fitting clothes. Every muscle was defined. Every movement was powerful. Nina's artist brain immediately started cataloging details. The way the light caught his cheekbones, the strong line of his jaw, the curve of his lips. And then he stuck his finger up his nose and ate it. "Salty," he announced happily. Nina's aesthetic appreciation died a swift and violent death. He was grinning like a 6-year-old who'd just discovered sugar. He held up a plastic cup pyramid proudly. Then he saw Nina. For a fraction of a second, his whole aura changed. His eyes, rich, warm brown, went sharp. Assessing. Old. Then, just as quickly, that focus vanished. "Oh," he breathed. "You're pretty." He bounced closer, socks sliding on the polished floor. "Are you the wife? Grandma said my wife was coming." "Yes," Nina said. "I'm Nina." "Nina," he sang. "Sounds like a song. Nina, Nina, Bobina. Fi, fi, fo, fina. Nina." Despite herself, one corner of her mouth twitched. "Charles, dear," Evelyn chided gently. "Use your inside voice." Charles blinked at Nina, then leaned in, studying her face with intense curiosity. "Your eyes are weird," he said matter-of-factly. "Not bad weird, just like storm clouds, or smoke, or that stuff in the sky when the sun hides." "Fog?" Nina guessed. "Yeah, fog eyes," he nodded firmly. "Pretty fog." Behind her, Denise shifted uncomfortably. She hadn't expected this. Nina hadn't either. Evelyn clapped her hands softly. "Charles, why don't you show Nina the garden? She loves art. You love bugs." "It'll be perfect." "Bugs!" Charles grabbed Nina's hand like a kid who'd just been told recess got extended. "Come on, wife Nina. I gotta show you Gerald. He's a beetle. He's my friend." Nina let herself be pulled along, her mind spinning. This was going to be the longest 3 months of her life. The Hoffman garden looked like something out of a glossy magazine spread. Perfect lines of hedges, a fountain whispering in the middle, roses spilling color everywhere. Nina could have set up an easel and stayed for days. Instead, she watched a billionaire heir squat in the dirt, poking a beetle. "This is Gerald," Charles announced solemnly. "Say hi." "Hi, Gerald," Nina said. "He's shy," Charles stage whispered. "But he likes you, he told me." "You speak beetle?" Nina asked, unable to help herself. "Only on Tuesdays," he said, dead serious. Then he burst out laughing at his own joke. She found herself laughing too. It was disarming. She sat on a bench while he continued his bug tour like a hyperactive nature show host. But between the goofy smiles and nonsense, things didn't quite line up. His hands, for one. The way he moved. There was no hesitancy, no clumsiness that usually came with serious brain trauma. Every motion was precise, controlled, even when he exaggerated it for effect. And his eyes. Every now and then, when he thought she wasn't paying attention, something in them changed. Focused, calculating. Like a curtain sliding back for half a heartbeat. It happened when she mentioned she drew sometimes. "It helps me think," Nina said, watching him flip a ladybug onto its feet. "You draw?" he asked, too casual. His gaze sharpened. "Like, for real?" "I try," she said. The sharpness flickered. Then he gasped dramatically. "Can you draw Gerald? He'd look so cool in a hat, like a top hat. Gerald the fancy beetle." The curtain dropped. Nina sighed. Definitely the longest 3 months of her life. "Wife Nina?" She looked up. "Yes, Charles?" He plopped down on the grass in front of her, long legs folding easily. "Do you really want to marry me?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. "Why do you ask?" "Grandma says people get married because they love each other," he said, frowning a little. "You don't even know me. You look sad." He studied her face with unnerving accuracy. "Like somebody told you to do something you don't want to do," he added softly. Nina swallowed. "Life is complicated, Charles." "I don't like complicated," he said. "I like simple. Bugs, cake, cartoons." He tilted his head. "Did someone make you marry me?" That flash again, too perceptive, too direct. Nina forced a small smile. "What about you? Did someone make you marry me?" she asked back. He blinked, obviously not expecting the question fired back at him. Then his whole face shifted back into goofy innocence. "Grandma wants a wedding," he said cheerfully. "Grandma gets what she wants, or she gives me the look." He widened his eyes dramatically. "The look is scary." Nina almost smiled for real. Almost. "Come on," she said, standing. "Let's go back inside. I think your grandma worries about you." "She worries a lot," he agreed, hopping up with a grace that made her eyes linger just a little too long on his shoulders. "Don't worry, wife Nina. I'll protect you from the look." He offered her his arm like a clumsy prince. She took it, and could not shake the feeling that she was the one walking into danger. The ceremony was small. Just family, a few board members, a lawyer or two who cared less about love and more about signatures. Nina stood at the front of the ballroom, ivory dress simple but elegant, her gray eyes steady even though her heart was beating way too fast. Her mother and Franklin sat to one side, Madeline between them, seething in designer silk. "She stole my life," Madeline muttered under her breath. "And she's stuck with the broken version of him. Serves her right." At the other end of the aisle, Charles stood with his grandmother. He wore a dark suit that fit him like it had been tailored right onto his body. He tugged at the sleeves like they were annoying. "Nervous, sweetheart?" Evelyn asked. He leaned down and whispered in his childish voice, "Do I have to kiss her on the mouth?" Evelyn chuckled. "Only if you want to." He looked thoughtful. Then he straightened as the music began. Charles didn't walk down the aisle so much as bounce. He waved at people. He paused to stare at a chandelier. He almost tripped over his own feet once and laughed like it was the best joke in the world. When he finally stopped in front of Nina, he beamed. "You look like an angel," he whispered loudly. "A fog-eyed angel." "Thank you," Nina murmured, trying not to blush. The officiant went through the script. Charles repeated every word, stumbling over matrimony but getting through. When it was time for the rings, he produced hers from his pocket with a magician's flourish. "I didn't drop it," he said proudly. "I practiced." He slid the ring onto her finger with surprising care. "You may now kiss the bride," the officiant said. Charles's eyes went wide like saucers. He glanced at Evelyn. She smiled and nodded. He leaned close. For a moment, Nina forgot to breathe. Up close, she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, the faint scar by his eyebrow, the small dimple in his left cheek. He smelled like something expensive and warm. He brushed his lips against her forehead. Soft, gentle, almost reverent. "There," he whispered. "Now you're really my wife." Something in Nina's chest fluttered dangerously. "Now can we have cake?" he added at full volume. And just like that, the moment broke. The master bedroom of the Hoffman estate looked like it belonged in a five-star hotel. Nina stood at the threshold, staring at the bed that could easily fit 4 people. The fireplace, the seating area, the massive windows overlooking the city. Her suitcase sat neatly beside the closet. Her life, repacked into someone else's space. Charles barreled in behind her, now in dinosaur print pajamas. "Wife!" he yelled happily. "Look, T-Rex, roar!" He stomped around, doing his best T-Rex impression. Nina pinched the bridge of her nose. "Charles, it's late." "It's early," he insisted. "It's early for bed o'clock. Can we read a story? Grandma always reads me a story." "We can talk about that," Nina said. "But first, sleeping arrangement." He flopped backward onto the bed, arms spread. "We share. We're married." "Boundaries exist," Nina said firmly. "You stay on your side. No crossing the pillow line." He considered this gravely. "What if I gotta pee?" "Then you cross the line to go to the bathroom," she said. "I'm not a monster." He grinned. "Okay, wife Nina, I promise. I will only cross the line for pee emergencies." She changed in the bathroom, letting the hot water of the shower beat against her neck for a moment longer than necessary. When she came out in soft pajamas, Charles was under the blankets, holding a worn book. "The Little Prince?" she asked, surprised. "It's my favorite," he said. "Grandma says it's for thinking people. I like the pictures." He hesitated. "Will you read it to me?" Something in his voice, small, vulnerable, hit her right in that part of her heart she pretended she didn't have. "Yeah," she said softly. "I can do that." She lay back, the big bed between them, and opened the book. "Once when I was 6 years old, I saw a magnificent picture in a book. By the end of the first chapter, his breaths had gone slow and deep." She glanced over. He was out cold, the goofiness smoothed away. Just a man now, not a child. In the soft glow of the bedside lamp, Nina studied his face. Peaceful, unguarded, almost innocent. He was beautiful. There was no denying it. Even with everything, he was still beautiful. Her fingers itched for her sketchbook. She wanted to capture this moment. The way his lashes cast shadows on his cheeks. The slight part of his lips. The strong line of his jaw. Nina slipped out of bed, grabbed her sketchbook and pencil from her bag, and settled into the armchair. Lines came easily. The angle of his jaw, the slope of his nose, the way one hand rested near his face, fingers relaxed. Shadows on his chest where the blanket had slipped a little. She lost track of time. When she finally set the pencil down, she had filled several pages. Each one captured some version of him. Peaceful, guarded, laughing in memory. Nina stared at them and felt heat rise to her face. She was in trouble. Because no matter how much she reminded herself this was a transaction, a deal, a 3-month sentence, her heart hadn't signed that contract. She glanced back at the bed. Charles murmured something in his sleep and rolled closer to the empty side where she'd been. "Don't go," he mumbled. Her chest ached. She slipped back under the covers, careful to face the opposite direction. "Good night, husband," she whispered. He didn't answer, but his breathing evened out. The next morning, Nina woke to singing. Bad singing. She sat up, squinting. Charles stood by the window, curtains thrown open, sunlight pouring over him. His robe hung loose, revealing the kind of torso sculptors would have written sonnets about. Broad chest, defined abs, smooth, dark skin catching the light. He was doing a little offbeat two-step, humming something that might once have been a pop song. "Morning, wife Nina," he chirped. "I made coffee? Well, I told the machine to make coffee. It beeped at me. I think that means it likes me." Nina forced her gaze to remain on his face. "Thank you." He grinned and reached for something on the armchair. Her sketchbook. The pages were still open from last night. Her heart dropped into her stomach. "What's this?" he asked, flipping it toward himself. His eyes widened. "Whoa." He stared at the drawings, at himself. For 2 seconds, just 2, his whole posture changed. His shoulders straightened. His face went still. His eyes darkened, thoughtful and calculating. He was looking at the art like a man, not a boy. Then the moment snapped. "You drew me when I was sleeping," he yelled. "I look like a superhero. Look at these muscles." He flexed for emphasis. Nina swallowed, pulse pounding, heat rising to her face. "It's just practice. I draw a lot." "It's amazing," he said, utterly sincere. "You're like a magic person. You take a real thing and make it live on paper." "That's kind of the idea," she said, flustered. He flipped through more pages. "Can you draw me, like, full body? With my Dino pajamas? And a cape?" She laughed, the sound surprising her. "We'll see." He beamed. "Best wife ever." As he set the sketchbook down, he caught her gaze. For half a heartbeat, something unspoken passed between them. He knew she was watching him. She felt he was hiding something, but neither said a word. "Y'all, if you think this fake fool act is about to crumble under real feelings, comment, 'This marriage is not staying fake' down below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Because Nina is about to walk in on something that could blow Charles' act wide open. 2 weeks of marriage. 14 days of reading The Little Prince before bed. 14 days of waking up to off-key singing in dinosaur pajamas. 14 days of watching Charles Hoffman pretend to be fascinated by bugs, clouds, and the way light reflected off spoons. And 14 days of Nina slowly losing her mind. Not because he was annoying, though he absolutely was, but because she couldn't stop noticing things. The way his handwriting, when he scribbled drawings for her, was remarkably steady for someone with supposed cognitive damage. The way he never actually tripped when he thought no one was watching, only when he had an audience. The way his eyes would go sharp and distant when he stared out windows, like a general surveying a battlefield. And the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. It wasn't the look of a child. It was the look of a man who wanted something he was pretending not to want. Nina told herself it didn't matter. This was a transaction. 3 months, then freedom. Information about her father. Money for art school. A clean break from the Langston family forever. She didn't need to care about Charles Hoffman's secrets. She didn't need to care about Charles Hoffman at all. And yet she couldn't help that her entire focus in life was shifting to him. It started with the art supplies. Nina came back to the bedroom one afternoon to find an entire professional-grade easel set up by the window, complete with canvases, brushes, and paints that cost more than her entire previous wardrobe. "What is this?" she asked Charles, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed, attempting to build a house of cards. "Presents," he said happily, watching the cards topple for the 5th time. "Grandma said you like art, so I told the helper people to get art stuff. They brought lots. This is thousands of dollars worth of supplies, Charles." He shrugged, rebuilding the card foundation. "Is that a lot? I don't really understand money, but Grandma says we have bunches of it, so..." He waved vaguely. "Bunches for you." Nina ran her fingers over a set of oil paints. The brand was one she had only ever seen in professional art magazines. Gallery artists used these. The kind of artists who sold pieces for 6 figures. "Charles, I can't accept..." "Too late!" He grinned, accidentally knocking over his card house again. "No takebacks, house rules." She opened her mouth to argue. He stuck out his tongue. Despite herself, she laughed. The next day, it was clothes. Designer dresses appeared in her closet, her exact size, in colors that complemented her skin tone and brought out her gray eyes. Nothing too flashy, nothing too revealing. Just beautiful, tasteful, like someone had actually paid attention to what she might like. "The shopping people picked them," Charles said when she confronted him. "I just said pretty things for my pretty wife, and they did the rest. You can't just..." "House rules." He put his hands over his ears. "La la la, can't hear you, house rules." Then came the jewelry. A simple gold bracelet one day. Pearl earrings the next. Nothing ostentatious. Somehow the shopping people had figured out that Nina didn't like flashy things. It was thoughtful. Too thoughtful for someone who supposedly couldn't remember what day it was. Nina started keeping a mental list of inconsistencies. The way he always remembered her coffee order. Black with a splash of oat milk, even though he claimed to forget complicated things. The way he knew exactly which chapters of The Little Prince they had already read and never asked her to repeat one. The way his vocabulary would slip sometimes. using words like leverage and strategic before catching himself and substituting simpler terms. And the way he looked at her sketches. Nina had filled 3 sketchbooks since the wedding. Most of the pages were landscapes, the garden, the fountain, the way Chicago looked from the penthouse windows at sunset. But if she was being honest, really brutally honest with herself, most of her best work featured Charles. Charles sleeping, moonlight on his face. Charles laughing at something silly, his whole body radiating joy. Charles in profile, staring out a window with that calculating look he didn't know she had caught. Charles's hands, his shoulders, the curve of his neck. She told herself it was just practice. He was an interesting subject. Good bone structure, expressive features. That was all. Lies. All lies. One evening. After their nightly reading session, Charles fell asleep mid-chapter. His head had somehow migrated to her shoulder, his breath warm against her collarbone. Nina set the book aside and reached for her sketchpad automatically. She was halfway through capturing the way his lashes fanned against his cheeks when she felt eyes on her. He was awake, watching her. "You're always drawing me," he said quietly. No goofy voice, no childish inflection, just him. Nina's pencil froze. It's just practice. Can I see?" She should have said no, should have made an excuse, should have protected whatever was left of her dignity. Instead, wordlessly, she handed him the sketchbook. Charles sat up slowly, the blanket pooling at his waist, and began to flip through the pages. The silence stretched. Nina watched his face, heart hammering, as he took in page after page of himself. "These are incredible," he said finally. Still no character voice. His tone was low, serious, almost reverent. "You see things other people don't see. It's just, don't." He looked up at her, and his eyes were completely unguarded. "Don't diminish yourself. You're extraordinarily talented, Nina." The way he said her name, not wife Nina, just Nina, made something in her chest ache. Then he blinked, and the mask flickered back into place. "I mean," his voice went high and goofy again. "These are so cool. I look so fancy, like a movie star. Can you do one where I'm riding a dinosaur? A big dinosaur?" But it was too late. She had seen, and she wasn't going to forget. If you're screaming at your screen right now at Charles Slip and Cover Up, drop a comment saying, "We see you, Charles," and hit that like button because this man's cover is about to get blown wide open. The cracks in Charles' mask started to widen the day Nina saw him in the gym. Nina hadn't meant to find the gym. She had woken up early, too early, the kind of early that came from restless dreams she didn't want to examine, and decided to explore the mansion. 3 weeks and a few days in, she still got lost sometimes. The place was ridiculous. More hallways than a hospital, more rooms than a hotel. She had been looking for the library when she heard it. A rhythmic sound, metal clinking, heavy breathing. She followed the noise down a corridor she'd never noticed before, pushed open a heavy oak door and stopped breathing. The gym was state-of-the-art. Mirrors lined every wall. Equipment that probably cost more than most people's houses filled the space. And there was Charles, shirtless, muscles on muscles on muscles. He was doing pull-ups, his back to her, and sweet mother of everything holy, the man was built like a Greek god who'd been hitting the weights for fun. Wide shoulders tapered to a narrow waist. Every pull revealed definition that didn't come from casual exercise. This was discipline. Years of it. The body of a man who took fitness as seriously as most people took their careers. Not the body of a man who spent his days catching bugs and begging for chocolate cake. Nina watched, transfixed, as he completed rep after rep with mechanical precision. His form was flawless. His focus was absolute. Each movement controlled and deliberate. Then he dropped from the bar, turned, and saw her. For 3 heartbeats, neither of them moved. His chest heaved with exertion. Sweat glistened on his skin like he'd been painted by some artist obsessed with masculine perfection. His eyes, those lying, beautiful eyes, traveled over her slowly, deliberately, with an intensity that made her skin feel too tight. He didn't look confused. He looked hungry. Then, like watching a door slam shut, His expression shifted. "Wife Nina!" He bounded toward her, arms wide. "You found my monkey place. I hang from bars, like at the playground. Grandma says it helps my brain get stronger." "Charles." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "How long have you been doing this?" "Doing what?" "Working out, training, whatever this is." She gestured at his body, his extremely, unfairly, problematically beautiful body. "This doesn't happen by accident." He tilted his head, all puppy dog innocence. "The doctor said exercise is good for healing, so I do the lifting and the hanging and the running and—" "Charles." He stopped. She stepped closer. Close enough to see the rapid pulse in his neck. Close enough to smell the clean sweat on his skin. Close enough to watch his pupils dilate almost imperceptibly. "This level of muscle definition takes years of dedicated training," she said quietly. "Perfect form on advanced exercises. The discipline to maintain a physique like this. That's not something you develop in 3 weeks of helping your brain heal. Who are you, really?" Something flickered in his eyes. Fear? Hope? She couldn't tell. "I'm Charles," he said, voice wavering slightly. "I'm your husband. I like bugs and cake and 6 a.m. workouts? And perfect pull-up form that would make a Marine jealous?" She shook her head slowly. "Something doesn't add up, and I'm going to figure out what it is." For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he smiled. A real smile, small and almost sad. "You're smarter than they said you'd be," he murmured. Before she could ask what that meant, he was already grabbing a towel and heading toward the door. "Breakfast time. I want waffles, extra syrup and strawberries and—" The door swung shut behind him. Nina stood alone in the gym, heart pounding, mind racing. Who was Charles Hoffman? And why did finding out feel like the most dangerous thing she'd ever done? 1 month into the marriage, Nina's mother kept to the first part of her promise. A courier arrived at the Hoffman estate with a manila envelope bearing no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address in Milwaukee and a name. Elijah Covington, last known residence, 847 North Palmer Street. Nina stared at the paper until the words blurred. Her father. After 22 years of wondering. 22 years of being told he didn't want her. 22 years of imagining what she might say if she ever got the chance. She could just go. Find him. Get answers. "What's that?" She jumped. Charles had appeared beside her silently. Another thing that shouldn't be possible for someone supposedly struggling with basic cognition. "Nothing," she said quickly, folding the paper. "Doesn't look like nothing." He plopped down next to her on the couch, close enough that she could smell his cologne. "You've got your worried face on." "The one with the little crinkle." He pointed at her forehead, the forehead she kept covered with her bangs. "Right there. You notice a lot for someone who can't remember what he had for breakfast," she said without thinking. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the mask. Then, "Is it about your dad?" Nina went still. "How do you know about my father?" Charles shrugged, picking at a loose thread on the couch cushion. "Grandma told me stuff, before the wedding. She said you had a sad story and I should be extra nice to you." "She told you about my father?" "She said he went away when you were little, and your mom said mean things about him. And you didn't know where he was." He looked up at her with those disarmingly sincere eyes. "But now you know where he is?" Nina looked at the paper in her hands. "Maybe. Then you should go find him. It's not that simple." "Why not?" She laughed bitterly. "Because Milwaukee is 2 hours away. Because what if he doesn't want to see me? What if everything my mother said was true and he really did abandon me? What if I go all that way and he slams the door in my face?" Charles was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up. "I'll take you," he said. "What?" "I'll take you," he repeated. "To Milwaukee, to find your dad. I can't drive." He made a vague gesture at his head. "Brain's too shaky for cars, but I can have someone drive us, and I can come with you, so you don't have to be alone." "You'd do that? Just drop everything and drive 2 hours for someone you barely know?" He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You read to me every night, he said simply. You drew pictures of me that make me look like a movie star. You never get mad when I forget stuff or act silly. A pause. You're nice to me. Really nice. Not fake nice. I want to be nice back. Something in Nina's chest cracked open. Okay, she whispered. Let's go find my father. The drive took just under 2 hours. Charles spent most of it with his face pressed to the window like an excited kid on a road trip, pointing out interesting trucks and cloud shapes and billboards for fast food restaurants he wanted to try. But every now and then, when he thought Nina wasn't looking, he'd go quiet. Still. His reflection in the glass would show a completely different man. Serious, thoughtful, watching her with an intensity that made her stomach flip. She pretended not to notice. The GPS led them to a quiet neighborhood on Milwaukee's north side. Small houses with neat lawns, American flags on porches, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors' names and waved at the mail carrier. 847. North Palmer Street was a yellow bungalow with a white porch and window boxes that had once held flowers but now sat empty. A for sale sign stood in the small front yard, and on the door hung a wreath. Black ribbon, white flowers, a memorial wreath. Nina's heart plummeted into her stomach. Maybe it's for someone else, Charles said quietly, all pretense gone from his voice. A previous owner, or... The door of the neighboring house opened. An elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes stepped onto her porch, watching them with curiosity. Can I help you folks? She called out. You looking to buy the place? The realtor's number is on the sign. Nina's legs felt like they were made of concrete, but she forced herself to walk toward the woman. I'm looking for Elijah Covington, she said. I was told he lived here. The woman's face softened with immediate sympathy. Oh, honey, she said gently. I'm so sorry. Elijah passed away 6 months ago now. The ground tilted beneath Nina's feet. 6 months. She had been 6 months too late. The woman's name was Mrs. Patterson. She had been Elijah's neighbor for 3 years and, as it turned out, his closest friend. Come inside, she said, ushering them into her small, tidy living room. I'll make some tea. You look like you need to sit down, sweetheart. Nina sat on the floral couch in a daze. Charles settled beside her, close but not touching, his presence steady and warm. He was a good man, Mrs. Patterson said from the kitchen, her voice carrying clearly. Quiet, kept to himself mostly, but he'd help anyone who needed it. Fixed my porch steps last summer, wouldn't take a dime for it. Shoveled my walk every winter. Nina found her voice. Did he ever mention having a daughter? Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway, tea forgotten. Mention you? She let out a soft, sad laugh. Honey, he never stopped talking about you. He moved here because he got leads you lived somewhere close by? What? Wait right here. She disappeared down a hallway, returning moments later with a cardboard box that looked like it had been carefully preserved. After he passed, the bank took the house, Mrs. Patterson explained, setting the box on Nina's lap. Everything happened so fast. I managed to save what I could before they cleared everything out. Been keeping it safe, just in case. In case of what? In case you ever came looking. Nina's hands trembled as she opened the box. The first thing she saw was a photograph. A little girl with gray eyes and a gap-toothed smile, sitting on a man's shoulders. The man was laughing, his face young and full of joy. Her father. And her. Before everything fell apart. He kept that on his nightstand, Mrs. Patterson said softly. Looked at it every single day. Sometimes he'd just sit and hold it for hours. Nina's vision blurred with tears. She reached into the box and pulled out more photos. Nina as a baby. Nina learning to walk.